Chapter 685, A Single Ray of Light. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Zhang Yuochen looked at Gao Tanjiao and asked curiously, "As far as I know, the Sword Pavilion has been at the Ji sect headquarters since ancient times. When did it move to the Yin and Yang sect?" Ji sect was one of the three sects. Its headquarters were in Tantai state of the central region. The Sword Pavilion was not a mere pavilion. It housed the heritage of Ji sect's previous sword practitioners. It was also the world's most complete library of sword manuals. There were thousands of them. The Sword Pavilion thus represented the Ji sect's heritage in the Tao of the Sword. Ji sect had the best Tao of the Sword within the whole Kunlun's field. Zhang Yuochen could not understand why they had allowed their Sword Pavilion to be moved elsewhere. Gai Tanjiao said, "That's because someone supporting the Yin and Yang sect undermined the Ji sect." Gai Tanjiao spoke casually, but Zhang Yuochen understood at once. Only one person could control the fates of the Yin and Yang sect and the Ji sect, the Empress of the First Central Empire. Try and imagine how powerful an alliance between the Ji sect and its three major branches, the Yin and Yang sect, the Four Symbols sect and the Baguous sect, would be. How could Kai Yao ever permit such an alliance? 800 years ago, the Ji sect had been the foremost power within Kunlun's field. Its strength and influence exceeded that of both the Sacred Central Empire and the Qingqi Central Empire. 500 years ago, the imperial army had stormed into the Ji sect headquarters. Although the sect was then at the peak of its power, it was badly weakened after the battle. Many saints died. Even so, the Ji sect managed to recuperate thanks to its powerful background and historical legacy. Within a few dozen years, it had developed into a mighty force once again. When Empress Kai Yao ascended the throne, she at first supported the Confucian sect and undermined the Ji sect. Later, she employed devious methods by greatly supporting the three main branches of the Ji sect, the Yin and Yang sect, the Four Symbols sect, and the Baguous sect. She stirred up conflicts between the headquarters and its branches. Encouraged by the imperial court, the three main branches made a clean break. The Ji sect was no longer able to enjoy the esteem of its heyday. At least for now, Empress Kai Yao was the real ruler of Kunlun's field. Even the Ji sect headquarters had to listen to her. They didn't dare to disobey her orders. Empress Kai Yao's methods were indeed tenacious and extreme. She had managed to establish control over the oldest and largest organization of Kunlun's field within a matter of centuries. An array had been set up on the summit of the third-level mountain. It could ward off the powerful force of the ancient god's mountain. Gao Tanjiao's status was rather special. She arrived just outside the array with Zhang Yuochen. A faint circle of light soon appeared on the ground, morphing into a portal. Zhang Yuochen and Gai Tanjiao stepped into the light portal and entered an area guarded by the array. It was at the edge of a white stone square. The white stone square was very large. 3,000 meters both in length and width. It could accommodate up to 10,000 people. With such a large capacity, it was never crowded. The floor was covered with 30-centimeter thick granite tiles. One could see the inscription of array rippling on its surface. Zhang Yuochen used all his strength and stomped on the floor. The power from his feet was instantly dissipated by the array. The ensuing ripples disappeared into the floor. Gai Tanjiao glanced at Zhang Yuochen and smiled. Empress Kai Yao has issued a decree. The winning sect in the Sword Technique Conference will keep the Sword Pavilion for the next 100 years. It doesn't matter if it's the Ji sect headquarters, the Yin and Yang sect, the Four Symbols sect, or the Baguous sect. Zhang Yuochen was rather affected. He had not expected Kai Yao would resort to such underhand methods. They say that the Sword Pavilion holds the world's most complete collection of sword manuals. Whoever wins the Sword Pavilion will be astoundingly powerful for the next 100 years. But in order to win the Sword Pavilion, the three sects have to really battle it out against the headquarters. Gai Tanjiao said, "In the past few centuries, there have been 4 sword technique conferences. Geniuses from our sect have always emerged at every conference. They defeated contenders from the headquarters, the Four Symbols sect and the Baguous sect again and again. That's why we've managed to hold on to the Sword Pavilion thus far. The Yin and Yang sect is now as powerful as the headquarters because we've held on to the Sword Pavilion and managed to develop over the past centuries. However, There are a few differences in this coming sword technique conference. Zhang Yuochen quickly asked, what differences? Gai Tanjiao answered, according to our intelligence, many geniuses have emerged from the headquarters, the Four Symbols sect, and the Baguius sect. They have completed all 10 levels of Sword 1 and even many levels of Sword 2. In addition to the headquarters and its 3 branches, many young sword heroes have emerged from Mother suzerains as well. They are all world famous, like the young master of Fragrance City, Zhu Yui, or Sui Han from the Confucian Qin sect. Nothing like this has ever happened before. You should know that monks cannot really comprehend the Holy Road while they are still in the Fish Dragon realm. Their comprehension level is still fairly low. It's almost impossible for anyone to reach the completion of Sword 1 in that realm. But a number of gifted practitioners have emerged in the last few decades. Zhang Yuochen said with a smile. But the Yin and Yang sect has always been the top contending sect in the Kunlun's field, when judged by their achievements in the Tao of the Sword. They should fear no one. I believe our sect has already made adequate preparations. Gai Tanjiao shook her head. It's true that the Yin and Yang sect has nurtured 3 supreme talents in the Tao of the Sword. They were expected to shine during the Sword Technique Conference. But the task of defending the Sword Pavilion is arduous, and these 3 people are no longer up to the task. Why not? Zhang Yuochen asked. The first person betrayed the Yin and Yang sect. To be more precise, he wasn't from the Yin and Yang sect at all. He was a spy from the Four Symbols sect. He cunningly earned our trust and used the resources in the Sword Pavilion to master all 10 levels of Sword 1 to the completion. A raging, murderous look flashed across Gai Tanjiao's face. By the time we discovered his identity, he had fled back to the Four Symbols sect. Some say that he has mastered a few levels of Sword 2 as well. The Four Symbols sect is indeed rather crafty, Zhang Yuochen commented. They used the Yin and Yang sect's resources to nurture their own disciple, then make him contend for the Sword Pavilion against our sect. If I meet him again, I will kill him myself. Gai Tanjiao snorted coldly. Zhang Yuochen asked again. What about the second person? Gai Tanjiao held her hands behind her back and stared into the distance. The second person, well, you know her as well. Shifu. The Yin and Yang sect spent a great fortune trying to nurture her even before she was born. They drove a heart of the sword into her body, so she was of the heart integrated into Sword Realm at birth. With an innate advantage and serious nurturing by her family and the Yin and Yang sect, her Tao of the Sword should have reached unbelievable heights by now. But as of yet, she still hasn't mastered all 10 levels of Sword 1. If we let her represent our sect at the Sword Technique Conference, wouldn't we be mocked for having no talents? Zhang Yuochen frowned slightly. He knew Chifa well enough to understand she was quite gifted. With such intensive nurturing by the sect and the Kiz, she ought to have done better. Chifa did not look like a mediocre talent. Of course, Chifa was not really mediocre at all. She had reached the 8th change of the Fish Dragon realm and the 7th level of Sword 1 at a very young age. She was actually quite outstanding. Perhaps everyone expected too much from her. That was why the difference disappointed them. Zhang Yuochen said, isn't there someone else? The extraordinarily gifted Gai Tanjiao? She has been called the foremost talent from our sect in the last 10,000 years. If she attends, she may save the situation and help us keep the Sword Pavilion. Gai Tanjiao laughed and waved her hand. She's not good enough. Although she has mastered all 10 levels of Sword 1 to the completion, that's the limit of her cultivation. There's a wide gap between her cultivation and that traitor's. She cannot defeat the other sword geniuses either. Gai Tanjiao's gifts are in her fist and palm techniques, not in the Tao of the Sword. She can beat an ordinary half-saint there. Zhang Yuochen glanced at Gai Tanjiao and smiled. If all 3 of them can't make it, there's still you two, right? Me? Gai Tanjiao had a strange expression on her face, as if she was holding back a smile. Zhang Yuochen continued. If I'm not wrong, you have mastered all 10 levels of Sword 1 to the completion. Gai Tanjiao turned away immediately and strode over to the altar in the middle of the square. She was trying to hide her facial expression. My Tao of the Sword is greatly flawed. If I attend the conference, we will be utterly crushed. The Yin and Yang sect is in a perilous position in the coming Sword Technique Conference. You are our single ray of hope. Me? Zhang Yuochen smiled and asked, Aren't you thinking too highly of me? It doesn't matter if I look up toward or down upon you. You are simply the best young talent to have emerged from our sect in the Tower of the Sword at the moment. Although you've made your appearance a little late, I'm sure you will make great strides in the coming months once we nurture you intensively. Your comprehension ability is superb. Gai Tanjiao stopped walking and turned around. She threw a glance at Zhang Yuochen. As a disciple of the Yin and Yang sect, don't you want to do something for our sect? Zhang Yuochen was not averse to the Sword Technique Conference. He had indeed gained many benefits from the Yin and Yang sect. He would certainly do his best to help if he could. Maybe it was because Emperor Ming had once been a disciple of the Yin and Yang sect. As such, Zhang Yuochen felt a real sense of belonging here. Zhang Yuochen did not agree to her request at once. He said, "Let's wait until the end of the sword contests before I make my decision." Gai Tanjiao said contemptuously, "You are already in the top 10 of the 8th change of the Fish Dragon realm. There's no need for you to take part in the rankings. It's more important for you to practice the Tower of the Sword. Even if you come out on top, what do you gain but a little extra fame? If you really want to make your mark, wouldn't it be better to do it during the Sword Technique Conference? Cast your mind back. Didn't the Sword Emperor become famous during a Sword Technique Conference? Don't you want to be the second Sword Emperor?" Zhang Yuochen said, "What you say makes sense. If you have made your decision, I will bring you to see the Moonbarrier Sword Saint. In the coming months, he and the 9 sword holders will do their best to nurture you. You can make use of whatever resources you like from our sect," Gao Tanjiao said. Zhang Yuochen cast his eye on the huge altar in the middle of the square. He seemed to be pondering. "In other words, if I make a promise, I can remain at the summit of the 3rd level mountain and visit the sword pavilion whenever I please, and I can study all the sword manuals in the sword pavilion." "That goes without saying," Gai Tanjiao continued. "You can even peruse the wordless sword manual if you like. Think about it seriously. A chance like this doesn't come along all the time.